At 3:40 in the morning, a courier stepped into a command tent near Huffalize with ice frozen along the rim of his helmet. In his glove was not an enemy map, not an ammunition request, not a casualty list. It was a yellow weather message from 3rd Army Meteorology. Roads impassable by noon, whiteout conditions expected for 36 hours. Exposed movement not recommended. The battalion commander read it once. Then he laid the paper on the map table, took a red grease pencil, and wrote 5 words across the warning. Weather received, mission unchanged. Outside that tent, 480 American soldiers were already standing in snow, deep enough to hide their boots. Their rifles were wrapped in socks to keep the bolts from freezing. Their canteens were blocks of ice. Their medics were rubbing men's feet until the skin came away in the blankets. But Lieutenant Colonel Harold Whitcomb was warm. He had a stove beside his chair, dry gloves on his hands, and a belief so dangerous that no German artillery could have improved it. He believed command was stronger than winter. He believed a man with enough rank could bend the weather by refusing to respect it, and before the sun rose over the Ardennes, that belief would kill men who never even saw the enemy. This is not a story about courage. It is a story about the moment courage turns rotten. It is the story of a commander who tried to make snow salute him, and the general who made him answer for every frozen body the mountain gave back. Captain Daniel Rojas saw the warning before anyone else in the battalion. He was 31, born in El Paso, raised between railroad yards and desert heat, and he had learned early that weather was not scenery. Weather was labor. Weather was machinery. Weather was the difference between a truck that moved and a truck that became a monument. By January 1945, Rojas had served long enough to know that a map never showed the whole battlefield. It did not show the way oil thickened in a transmission. It did not show how fast a man's fingers stopped obeying him. It did not show the point where cold stopped being discomfort and became an executioner. That morning he walked into Whitcomb's tent holding the yellow message flat against his chest, because the wind kept trying to tear it out of his hands. The tent smelled of wet wool, kerosene, and coffee. A lantern swayed from the center pole on the table. Colored pins marked the route. The battalion was supposed to take through a narrow forest road toward a ridge line the Germans had already abandoned twice and retaken once. It looked simple on paper. 2 companies forward, 1 company in reserve, mortar section following the road, medical jeep behind the command group. But the road itself had disappeared. Snow had blown across it in white shelves. The ditches were invisible. The tree line had turned into a wall. Rojas put the message beside the map and said, "Sir, this Whitcomb did not answer at first. He stirred sugar into his coffee as if the entire war could wait for the spoon." Rojas tried again. 3rd Army Meteorology is calling for a ground halt on exposed movement. Visibility is already under 70 yards. If the wind climbs the way they predict, radios will be useless inside the hour. Whitcomb lifted the paper. His eyes moved across the warning. Then he looked at Rojas with the tired contempt of a man who had already decided that caution was a form of disobedience. "Captain," he said, "the Germans do not pause because American feet are cold." Rojas did not flinch. "No, sir, but German bullets are not the only things that kill Americans." That line should have ended the argument. It did not. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Whitcomb came from a family that measured men by the rooms they entered, and the names that opened doors before them. He was polished, educated, and deeply afraid of being ordinary. He had spent the war building a reputation for movement, fast movement, aggressive movement, movement that looked impressive on a staff report. The Ardennes had given men like him a terrible temptation. The German offensive was breaking. Higher command wanted pressure. Every officer could feel the war tilting toward its final act, and in that atmosphere a reckless advance could be mistaken for brilliance if the casualty numbers arrived late enough. Whitcomb understood that. He also understood promotion. What he did not understand was cold. He had never spent a night in a slit trench with a frozen blanket snapping like sheet metal. He had never tried to start a jeep with numb hands while wind cut through the seams of his coat. He had never watched a medic decide whether a blackened toe could be saved. To Whitcomb, frostbite was a footnote. To Rojas, it was a wound with no enemy attached. The battalion weather officer was called in next. Second Lieutenant Pierce was 22 years old, pale with exhaustion, and carrying a clipboard that shook in both hands. He explained the falling pressure. He explained the wind shift. He explained that once the snow band crossed the ridge, the battalion would lose road definition and lateral contact. Rojas added the part that mattered most. "If we lose the road in this timber, sir, we won't have a column. We'll have scattered platoons in a white room." Whitcomb set his cup down. "Enough." The room went still. Even the radio operator stopped turning the dial. Whitcomb stood over the map. He tapped the ridgeline with one gloved finger. "We were ordered to take this ground before dark." Rojas answered carefully. "We were ordered to take it with a battalion, sir, not leave one buried in the approach." The colonel's face hardened. "Weather is information," he said. "It is not permission." Then he took the red grease pencil and wrote across the message, "Weather received. Mission unchanged." He underlined the last word so hard the pencil tore the paper. Then he looked at every officer in the tent. "The first man who uses that storm as an excuse will be replaced before he finishes the sentence." At 5:10 the companies moved. They did not move like soldiers in a film. They moved like men being erased. The column stretched along the forest road, then narrowed, then broke. White swallowed the helmets first, then the shoulders, then the rifle barrels. Men tied rope between squads until the rope froze stiff. Drivers leaned out of half. Tracks to see the edge of the road and still slid into ditches they could not see. A Sherman tank at the rear lost its guide and turned too far left, its right track grinding into a drainage cut, until the whole machine sat useless, coughing exhaust into the snow. By 6:30, visibility dropped below 30 yards. By 7 o'clock, the radio net was mostly static. By 7:20, the first litter team came back with a private whose gloves had frozen to his rifle sling. His fingers were gray. He kept asking if he had been shot. The medic told him no. The private looked confused. He could understand a bullet. He could not understand losing his hands to air. Rojas stood outside the command tent, counting the men who returned. Not by name at first, just shapes, 2 walking. 1 carried, 3 leaning on one another. A sergeant came in with ice in his mustache and blood on his sleeve, though it was not his blood. "Captain," he said. B Company can't see the road. They're firing flares to keep position, but the flares are vanishing in the snow. Rojas went back inside. Sir, we have to pull them in. Whitcomb did not look up. We are not pulling back because snow is inconvenient. It is not inconvenient. It is separating the battalion. Then tell the battalion to close up. Rojas stared at him. There are moments in war when an officer hears an order and knows the rank behind it is real, but the judgment inside it is gone. That was the moment, not when Whitcomb ignored the forecast, not when he marked the paper, when he said, "Tell the battalion to close up," as if men could simply close up across blindness, wind, ice, and miles of broken timber. Rojas turned away before his face gave him away. He found the radio operator and sent a message to regiment through a relay station that still had partial contact. Weather warning ignored, battalion movement compromised. Non-battle casualties rising. Request immediate review. Then he waited. The answer did not come as a voice. It came as the sound of engines. At 8:40, 2 jeeps and a half. Track pushed into the assembly area from the south road. Men recognized the vehicles before they recognized the figure climbing out of the first jeep. The helmet, the long coat, the hard forward lean of a man who seemed personally offended by delay. General George Sess. Patton walked into the snow with his jaw set and his eyes narrowed against the white glare. He did not ask where the coffee was. He did not ask how the attack was going. He asked one question. Where is the weather message? Nobody moved for a second. Then Rojas handed him the yellow paper. Patton read the meteorology warning. He read the red pencil mark. Weather received, mission unchanged. Patton looked up. Who wrote this? Whitcomb stepped forward. I did, sir. Patton folded the paper once. Not slowly, not dramatically, just once sharply, like he wanted to keep his hands from doing something worse. You received a whiteout warning. Yes, sir. You received a ground movement caution. Yes, sir. You were advised that exposed movement would break contact and freeze men in place. Whitcomb swallowed. The tactical opportunity required pressure, sir. Patton's voice dropped. When a loud man becomes quiet, every man in the room listens harder. Pressure on whom? Whitcomb blinked, sir. Patton held up the paper. The Germans are not in this tent. The ridge is not in this tent. The storm is not in this tent. So tell me, Colonel, who exactly were you pressuring? No answer. Patton stepped closer. You pressured your own men. The wind hit the tent hard enough to make the lantern jump. Patton continued. You took a battalion that had already been fighting in the worst winter Europe has seen in years, and you marched it into a blind forest because a piece of paper hurt your pride. Whitcomb said, Sir, I believed hesitation would cost us the initiative. Patton snapped back. The initiative against what? A hill? A weather system? Your own reflection? No one breathed. Patton put the yellow warning on the map table and stabbed it with one finger. Winter is not a private, Colonel. It does not take orders from you. Roads do not become roads because you need them. Fingers do not keep blood in them because you wrote the word mission. Commander is paid to see reality before it kills his men. Whitcomb tried one last time. With respect, sir, aggressive command wins wars. Patton's eyes went cold. Aggressive command takes ground from the enemy. Stupid command takes limbs from Americans. Then the casualty numbers arrived: 39 severe frostbite cases, 17 men missing in the timber, 7 confirmed dead from exposure before noon. The ridge had not been taken. The Germans had not been surprised. No tactical advantage had been gained. Only the snow had advanced. Patton listened to the report without blinking. You traded 7 men for no ground, no contact, and no honor. Whitcomb's mouth opened. Patton cut him off. Do not answer. You have already said enough with that pencil. The relief of command took less than 3 minutes. Patton ordered the executive officer to take the battalion. He ordered the companies pulled back to hard shelter by section. He ordered warm vehicles prioritized for men who could no longer feel their feet. Then he ordered Lieutenant Colonel Whitcomb to remove his sidearm. Whitcomb stared at him. Patton said, "You wanted to prove the weather could be ignored." He pointed toward the timber. "There are 17 men out there who followed that lesson. You will now join the recovery detail and learn the part you left off the map." No one cheered. That mattered. This was not revenge. It was colder than revenge. It was accounting. Whitcomb went into the forest with a litter team, 2 medics, and a sergeant who had lost 3 men before breakfast. The former commander moved badly. His polished boots punched through the crust. His breath came in ragged bursts, snow-packed into the cuffs of his trousers. Every few minutes he looked back toward the road, and every time the road was harder to see. After 40 minutes they found the first missing soldier sitting against a pine, his rifle across his knees, his head lowered as if he had only stopped to rest. A medic knelt beside him and touched his neck. Nothing. Whitcomb stood there, unable to speak. The sergeant handed him one end of the stretcher. "Sir," the sergeant said with no heat in his voice at all, "mission unchanged." Whitcomb took the pole. They carried the body back through the snow. Then they went out again, and again. By mid-afternoon the final count had changed. 7 dead became 9. 17 missing became 3, still unaccounted for. 46 men were evacuated with frostbite severe enough to remove them from the line. Some would return, some would not. A few would spend the rest of their lives buttoning shirts with hands that never fully obeyed them again. The battalion had moved less than 2 miles. It had not met a German counterattack. It had been defeated by a commander who confused movement with leadership. Patton stayed until the last organized group had been pulled back. He walked the 8 not for comfort. He looked at the feet. He looked at the hands. He looked at the men who tried not to cry while medics thawed them too quickly and then too slowly. And then as gently as war allowed, one private, barely 20, apologized because he could not stand when the general passed. Patton stopped beside him. "Don't apologize for surviving an order," he said. That line moved through the battalion faster than any official directive. By evening Whitcomb was gone. His name was removed from the command board. His personal gear was loaded into a jeep under guard. There was no farewell speech, no handshake, no chance to explain the decision in prettier language. He had written his argument in red pencil. The snow had answered it in bodies. Captain Rojas kept the yellow weather message, not the original. That went into the inquiry file. But a carbon copy passed through his hands before the paperwork left the assembly area, and he folded it into the back of his field notebook. Years later, after the war, when he was back in Texas working on highway crews that learned to respect flash floods and heat shimmer and soft shoulders, he would still take that paper out. Only when young supervisors talked too proudly about pushing through, he would lay it on a desk and let them read the red words. Weather received, mission unchanged. Then he would say, "A warning is not fear. A warning is experience trying to arrive before the funeral." Whitcomb never commanded combat troops again. The official language was clean. Operational misjudgment, failure to adapt to conditions, improper risk assessment. Clean words are useful in records. They are less useful beside frozen dead men. Inside Third Army, the lesson required fewer words. Weather reports started traveling with the same urgency as ammunition counts. Road conditions were no longer treated as a clerk's nuisance. Exposure became part of the battlefield, not an excuse for leaving it, and officers who wanted to impress higher command learned to ask a harder question before ordering men into the open. Not, "Can I force them forward?" but, "What will still be alive when they get there?" That is the line between command and vanity. Command accepts that reality does not care who signed the order. Vanity believes the signature is reality. In the Ardennes, in January 1945, one colonel discovered the difference too late. He thought rank could outrun weather. He thought willpower could warm a forest. He thought a red pencil could turn a blizzard into a footnote, but the mountain did not salute. And 9 men paid for the lesson before anyone made him learn it.